Hi, I'm Ben,
And I'm Josh.
and this is the Bad at Magic podcast, a podcast about games, life, and other things. And welcome to episode 47.
Episode 47. So, Ben, we've established at this point that you are a fan of noir films as a genre. Is this true?
I suppose.
Okay. Have you ever seen the classic, The Maltese Falcon?
Um,
It's a Humphrey Bogart
I'll
film from
say a thing I
1941.
frequently say on this show. I'm aware of it.
I'm aware of The Maltese
I've
Falcon.
never
Well,
watched it. Have you?
no, never.
Okay,
But
all right.
it is a classic Humphrey Bogart noir detective film from 1941. And it's the standard classic noir genre. Like, this is one of the defining films of the genre, okay?
Wait,
He's
you've already thrown me off. It didn't come out in 1947?
No, it came out in 1941.
Okay.
So he's in his office. Beautiful woman comes in, hires him for a case. It's relatively simple and quick, but afterwards, his partner is murdered by some unseen thugs, and then he is accosted by somebody else to really get engaged and try to track down this what do you call that? Not Chekhov's gun, but the other thing, the who's it's or the unobtainium or whatever. The
Yeah,
thing that we need. It's the
the
Maltese Falcon.
yeah, oh crap, we got to think of it. Like we can't move on until we know it. It's the MacGuffin.
The MacGuffin. All right. And thank you, listeners, for everyone that shouted in their cars driving to work, MacGuffin. That did not help us at all. Anyway, so he is hired to find this thing, the Maltese Falcon, which is a little statuette of a falcon. It's like maybe a foot tall, and it looks like it's black or onyx or something in the film because it's black and white. Anyway, Humphrey Bogart was apparently notorious for dropping props. So they had to make
Like Linus
multiple.
from Linus Text Tips.
Yeah, apparently. Like, this is this is all secondhand. I didn't know the man, so I'm only getting this from other accounts. But so they had to make multiple Maltese Falcons, and for some reason there was the primary one, which was made of a resin, and then there were two others that were made of lead. And the lead Maltese Falcons weighed 47 pounds.
Uh, there's our 47.
There it is. Everybody that hung in there on the edge of their seats waiting for the 47. There it
Awesome.
is.
Well, you can't, since you haven't seen it, you can't say if you recommend it or not. But I remember as a kid, whenever I watched Sesame Street, there was this bit where Kermit was like a private investigator, and he'd be in his office, and like some hard luck case woman would come in and ask him to take her case. And I think it was supposed to be, this. It was coming. It was a parody of this thing, private eye in a black and white movie, and some hard look dame comes in looking for someone to take her case.
And like I said at the beginning, this has to be one of the defining films of the genre. It's got Humphrey Bogart, and it was way back in 1941. This is probably what people point at when they're talking about this.
Man, this came out like right in the middle of World War II. All right. Well, I don't know if you've convinced me to watch it, but now I see the connection to 47.
You're welcome.
Well, speaking of 47, you had a great idea last week that it was about time that we provided some additional bonus content to our supporters on Patreon. So if you've not yet supported us on Patreon, but you're interested, now we've posted a third exclusive bonus episode. This one, Josh and I got together and talked about the ways in which smartphones have changed the world and what our decision calculus is for our next upgrade.
Doesn't that just sound right up our alley? Some nerdy, esoteric, weird cultural phenomenon that we also then get to talk about our personal preferences. Like, if you're not chomping at the bit already, then I don't know what's going to get you more fired up, listeners.
Yeah, or if you want a Bad at Magic challenge coin, I've still got those available to people who sign up at Patreon. I'll send you one of those as well.
At the time of recording, if you're listening from the far future, they might all be gone.
Well, speaking of luck and the far future, so over the past couple of episodes, we've kind of relived the fact that Josh had been chomping at the bit for a long time to get a new video card in his computer, which led to this chain of events that caused him to completely do a rebuild as well as an update. So he posted a great article on badatmagic.live as well as a video on our YouTube channel. And there was something I wanted to point out about all that I think you'd kind of missed.
Okay.
So I did some research on it, and you got the video card at a time when they're really hard to come by through what's called the Newegg Shuffle. And when I looked up the Newegg Shuffle, I found out that the odds of actually having your name drawn in the daily Newegg Shuffle are really low. Like, there's a lot of people competing.
Yes, these are very high demand things that people want.
Did you know that? Did you know that you were more likely to get struck by lightning than you are to win the Newegg Shuffle?
I didn't know those were the odds. Now I did one day. I don't know how I did it, but I was clicking around through their system and their interface, and there was a graphics card that I wanted in the Shuffle, and somehow I got the product page up through a different portal or whatever, and it actually showed the quantity that they had in stock, and the quantity was 2. So there was, I knew that there was hundreds of thousands of people probably logging into this thing every day,
Right.
and they had 2. So the fact that I was actually selected was super exciting, and I'm very happy to have the hardware that I got.
0.001%.
Now I will say they forced it. They bundled it with a motherboard that I did not want, but it was better than my current motherboard. So what am I going to do? Just put that in a closet? No. So I had to buy. So then I had to use the new motherboard, but it wouldn't fit in the old case. So I had to buy a new case, but that case has got bad airflow, so I had to cut holes in that case. Like, it turned into this whole thing just to try to get the one thing I wanted.
And it made a great video. Now, you got lucky that the motherboard worked with your processor and you didn't have to buy a new processor.
Well, I wasn't going to do that because processors are also on short supply. Those are things that are also on the Newegg Shuffle. It
didn't know if it was going to work or not. You thought it might not.
I was like 75% that it would work. It's not officially listed on the motherboard support, but a ton of people on the internet were saying yes, they just don't list it because it's so old. It was made 2 years ago. Why would they list processors that are 2 years old? Nobody uses those anymore. I know, right? But it does work, and it's wonderful, and it's in a smaller case, and I'm using it right now, and it's great, and it makes me so happy.
Great. Now, when I was working for the Ministry of Defense in England a couple of years ago, one of the things that I did was I was in a position where I was making decisions on behalf of the ministry as far as like adopting new technologies or buying new products or things like that, which frequently had people coming to me to either want to demo new things or try to get me. So I was really like looking at a lot of things that were on the cutting edge of technology. And one time I got invited to go down to University College London, which is right in Kensington on like the museum row where like all of the great British museums are and stuff like that. So I got the Queen bought me a train ticket. I took the train into London, and then I walked to this beautiful part of town down to this historic campus, and I got to go to the Data Visualization Laboratory at University College London as an honored guest on behalf of the Ministry of Defense. This job was insane sometimes, Josh.
It sounds like it.
So they met us at the door, and they were really excited to greet us and demonstrate what they were showing. So they took us up into the data visualization laboratory, and we walk into this room, and there is a bank of widescreen, high-definition computer monitors in basically 355 degrees around a center point, and it was probably 30 feet in diameter.
Wow, okay.
So imagine a 30-foot diameter wall of screens surrounding you. I think they were 7 or 6 high. So imagine 6 monitors high and then all the way around you in every direction except for a little gap for you to walk into it.
This sounds a lot like that really lame ride they used to have at Disneyland where they filmed a bunch of like nature scenes in 3D or all the way around in 360 degrees.
Yes. And that's all it would be is just a curiosity, except for the software behind it.
Okay.
But finish describing the ride at Disneyland.
I was just going to say, looking back, that was a ride for the parents to be like, no, everybody be quiet. We're going to stay inside in the air conditioning for just 10 minutes and watch a little TV clip that goes on, and I'm just going to sit and rethink my choices as an adult.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's very high capacity. You don't got to wait long. You can just walk in and then you can look anywhere you want, but the kids got to be quiet and not go anywhere.
And it's inside and it's air conditioning and it's just let's just stop for like 5 minutes.
Yeah. So running all of these displays we were surrounded on were a bunch of computers that could do different data visualization things for apps. For instance, one of them was like a real-time display of like all of the transit systems in Singapore, which was really cool.
For whatever reason.
But the reason I was thinking about this, the one that they were showing that was the most fascinating to me, was a real-time visualization of the Bitcoin. What's the data file called?
What the Bitcoin data file? I have no idea. Are you talking about the actual value of the currency or the the hard code that is behind it.
So the way that this protocol works, where Bitcoin
Oh,
blockchain, the way the blockchain works is that there is people that think of cryptocurrency aren't understanding if they think of it the way you would have like a bank account and you would wire money to people, because there's a fundamental thing that's happening underneath the surface that people don't understand that's also revolutionary about Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency. That is, when you are interacting with any traditional banking electronic transfer of currency, it's centrally adjudicated. There is an authority. They own the servers. They have administrators on the servers, and they could do things. For instance, they could move money out of your account without telling you, because
that happened to you
they
once.
own the computers. They control everything.
Right.
But with Bitcoin, it's not like that at all. It has what's called the blockchain, which means that everyone that's subscribed to it keeps a copy of all of the data that tells where all of the Bitcoin are at any given moment, with just numbers and account numbers and stuff like that. But there is no server that stores the single authoritative copy of the Bitcoin blockchain. Everyone that participates is part of that server. And so whenever a change is made to it, it replicates across everyone's copies. So that it, once it's validated and the passwords are typed in and stuff like that. There's some side effects of this. One of them is that if you forget your password to your Bitcoin,
it's gone.
It's gone. Like you can't call the Bitcoin server and be like, I forgot my password. Can you unlock my account? There's no such thing.
So I don't know if you knew this about me, Ben, but I had a friend of mine when I was back at flying for the Air Force talk to me about cryptocurrency and like this the cool like computer techie stuff part of it. And like he told me enough about it to get me interested, and I read a couple of quick articles and realized, oh, well, I've got at the time a pretty slamming computer. I bet I could make like $20 or $30 in the course of a couple of months with this thing running at night. And so I had my computer mine, I think, 0.8 of a Bitcoin or something over the course of many months.
That's a lot.
Well, at the time, it was less than $100. And now...
and then you sold it?
No, I put it in a wallet somewhere and then forgot where it was. And then 10 years later, Bitcoin's worth $20,000, $30,000 a Bitcoin.
What? You own 0.8 Bitcoin and you forgot the password?
Not only did I forget the password, I forgot my username, and I forgot the site that I had it stored in, wherever it was. It's just
that
gone.
Is unbelievable. So it's probably worth $30,000 right now.
Somewhere, yeah. There's tens of thousands of dollars that's theoretically, air quotes, mine, but I just have no access to it.
Wow. Okay. Well, that was a good vision. That was a good case study, but I was hoping it wouldn't strike quite so close to home.
It's fine. It's like I never really had it anyway.
So back to the data visualization laboratory at University College London.
Okay.
So I'm standing in there and they run this program and they'll be like, basically it had a local copy of the Bitcoin blockchain and it would start visualizing all the transactions from any given moment. So they'd hit reset and then all around you on the screen, a little blip would appear that would indicate a transaction. And then it would replicate and you would visualize in real time all of the Bitcoin transactions happening all around the world, all around you.
And so does that add any value to that? Just like, because if you're looking at one side of this 355-degree circle, you obviously can't be looking at the other side of the 355-degree circle. Like, it just gives you a sense of how big these complex systems are, but it's not useful.
Here's the thing. Here's the value of data visualization. If you were just looking at the matrix, like actually looking at the ledger, you wouldn't see anything. But when you visualize it, the things that are abnormal pop out. For instance, if let's say I had 10 Bitcoin and I sent out a transaction that distributed to each of 10 people, it would look like a starburst.
Okay, that makes sense. So you'd be the central point and it would go to 10 other points.
Right. If I had if there was one that I sent to someone and they sent it to someone else and they sent it to someone else and they sent it to someone else, it would look like a snake. Mm-hmm. There were also ones that kind of looked like a pinwheel, where it would be from one account to multiple accounts, but in like close succession. Basically, though, the anomalies that were really abnormal transactions popped out in this data visualization. Like you could see, hey, that's different than everything else that's happening right now. And because of the way Bitcoin works, you can see every transaction all the time.
Okay. So, like in this case, they could theoretically use that to identify strange or abnormal security transactions,
fraud, money laundering, those kinds of things. Yeah. Anyway, that was an enjoyable day out, and I was done by noon, and then I got to spend the rest of the afternoon walking around London before I had to catch my train back.
Man, I loved when the government paid to send us on like techie field trips like that.
Yeah,
I remember being sent with a handful of airmen to some joint defense laboratories, like Expo or whatever. And I talked to a guy about the airborne laser for probably 45 minutes because it was fascinating, the kind of crap that they were doing. And like the 3 airmen that were with me were just so done. They just wanted to like go get some fries or the free swag that gets handed out with these things.
Stop asking more questions, Captain Fleshman.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, tell me more about this adaptive iris on the front of the laser. That sounds fascinating. And just like, you can just hear them groan behind me. Like,
well, that's back when it was probably in prototype. I think it's in active service now. Maybe we should do a segment on that in the future about airborne laser. That would be awesome.
All right, here's a teaser. This is the coolest thing I think about this laser, okay? Is they actually shoot 2 lasers at whatever the target is. And the first laser, all it does is measure the distortion effect that the atmosphere has on the laser between the airplane and the target. And so then they change how the main laser is going to come out, so that way the atmosphere between the source and the target becomes the rest of the lens necessary to focus the laser to be lethal.
Holy crap, that's awesome.
Oh, isn't that awesome? It's just so nerdy and great.
Okay, so that's the awesome, nerdy, cool part about the government. Let me tell you about some of the boring, horrible stuff that's hopefully not too bad to listen to.
If this is another story about you getting a shot, I'm out. Like, I can't handle it anymore.
It almost is. So while you're deployed, you're kind of shielded from some of the nonsense the military tends to do day to day. I think you and I have talked about this on the cast. But as soon as I got back off my deployment, I started getting calls from the base to participate in what we euphemistically call the Air Force Drug Demand Reduction Program.
Which is a really stupid thing to call it. This is the program where you get called and randomly selected, and you have to go
in air quotes.
There's a quota for different ranks and age groups and all sorts of things, but you have to give some of your bodily fluids that they put in a big bucket of other people's bodily fluids and see who's doing the drugs.
Yeah, so I got called in. And I was working from home, so I had to put on my uniform and go into the base. And first you have to go to your orderly room where the administrators are, and they provide you a letter that they sign that gives you the instructions to attend there. Now, there's a whole bunch of legal stuff surrounding this because as you can probably guess, it's very high stakes, even if they make an error. So they're being very careful to follow everything to the letter of the law. So if they were to notify you and you knew you'd been on drugs, you might have reason to avoid it. So they make it so that it's very positive control oriented, where you have to be there within a certain time of notification, and then within a certain time of being notified, you have to report to the testing site within a certain number of hours, and then you have to have completed the test by a certain number of hours. And everything's tracked and time-stamped and verified and all that kind of stuff. So I went to the office, and they served me my letter. I signed it. You have 2 hours to report. And I got in my car. I was feeling like I'd studied enough for my test, and I was going to do well. And I drove to the clinic, and I was sitting in my car, and I picked up my phone, and the sirens sounded. And I opened my car door so that I could hear what they said on the giant voice, because anyone that hasn't been on a military installation, you need to understand that everywhere on the military installation, they have klaxons that can sound an alarm in case you're under like an air raid or something, and then give you instructions. Most anywhere you go, you can't really understand the voice. They do okay to try to make it so you can understand it. And the voice said, exercise, exercise, exercise.
Oh,
active shooter. Lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. So I have not yet made it into the building, and now people are running around locking all the doors. And I've got to pee.
And I've got to pee because that's how I studied for this test.
And I'm like, you gotta be freaking kidding me. Now, there's a tension here that you probably understand intuitively right away that other people might not understand. So here's the tension. The wing commander that's conducting the active shooter exercise is making sure the members of his wing are prepared to respond in the case of an active shooter, which, unfortunately, as you've seen, that things like the Fort Hood shooting back in 2008 are very real and could cost people their lives, and their ability to respond in such a situation is paramount. So that's very important to him. However, this paper that I've signed that says I have a certain number of hours to report to this clinic before it doesn't have any allowance for an exercise.
Oh, yes. Big Daddy Air Force does not care that you were locked out of the building because of a base-wide exercise. If you didn't pee on time, sir, you are at fault, and it is your fault. There's no one else to blame. There is no such thing as mitigating circumstances. You're going to get pulled and chewed into this machine.
You nailed it. And not only that, but this isn't like other kind of trouble in the Air Force. This is like the you need a lawyer kind of trouble. Because if you don't pee in the cup in time, they're going to assume that you were doing drugs.
Because, of course, that is the only explanation for you not making it on time to that test.
So I'm locked out of the building, and I'm kind of... And part of me wants to just go, okay, I'll just go sit in the car until the exercise is over. But it just started. And I don't know how long it's going to take them to do their active shooter drill.
And fun thing about base-wide exercises, they can last anywhere from an hour to a week.
Right. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm just gonna go. I'm just gonna take them on because I have the law on my side. I hope.
Well, was there a mail slot in the front of the door? Maybe they didn't have to unlock the door for you.
Pee through the slot.
There you go. They could have a cup and catch it. They got gloves. It's fine.
So I go to the back door, which is supposed to be an alternate entrance, which are definitely not the kind of places they'll keep unlocked during an active shooter drill. And I'm kind of loitering by the back door, and 3 people wearing reflective vests come around the corner.
Okay, so for those of you who are not paying attention, anybody wearing a reflective vest during an exercise are the people that are running the exercise. And so, Ben, you are now in trouble for a different reason.
Yes. Sir, what are you doing? We're having an exercise right now. You should not be here.
Oh, there are so many. I have at least 4 stories where this happens, where you have 2 conflicting directions given to you by the government.
Classic government they make absolutely conflicting directions.
Yes, they're conflicting, mutually exclusive directions that are equally valid, that are equally going to get you in serious trouble if you don't follow them.
Yeah, so I'm like, no, you know what? I got nothing to lose here. I'm sticking to the I gotta pee in a cup thing. So
yeah, what are they gonna do? Make you move to Louisiana and then force you to retire?
So I said, I'm here for a drug test. And you're like, sir, we're having an exercise. I'm like, I have to pee. And the woman in the reflective vest, you could see her reboot her brain and realize that what I was doing actually took precedence over the exercise. And she said, okay, I'll see if I can send someone to unlock the door.
Because everybody in the building is currently hiding under their desks.
But I could also see on her face that I was such a low priority on her list of things she had to do just then.
Well, yeah, because you're not her problem.
Right. So that was fortunate for me in that she decided not to escalate and cause a problem with me because she was busy doing other things. She just went on and left me alone. But she also didn't get anyone to unlock the door. So I'm sitting there, and one of the exercise guys comes and knocks on the door, and the person inside opens the door to try to talk to him, and I just snuck in. And they tried to talk to me, and I just went right past them.
That's one of those times where it's like, I'm a major, shut up, I've got to pee. I'm just going to go sit over there.
Yeah, and then I went to the drug clinic, and they kind of had the door locked in there, and I'm like, I'm here for a test, and I was holding the letter, and then everything went smoothly, and I was done.
I am imagining a universe where they are, a week later, doing the giant debrief with the wing commander and all the people that were in charge of this exercise, and they've got these slides, and here, all right, was there any problems with the exercise? Well,
did anyone sneak into the doors when they were supposed to be locked?
Well, there was this one major, and I imagine this person clicking the slide, and it's just a picture of you looking dopey hanging out by the back of the building, and there's an audible groan like, not this guy again.
Yeah, so I thought it was over. Then Monday at 2 o'clock, I get a phone call, and I look at my phone and I see it's the orderly room again. And I pick it up and I'm like, hello? And like, Major Rich, you need, and you understand, they don't tell you you're getting selected for the drug test. They say you need to come into the office and sign for a letter.
Yes, and that is what's funny is that those are the only letters you have to sign for.
Right.
Like,
There's only one thing that means.
It's the worst kept secret in the military. Like, if you get this phone call, you know exactly what's going on.
So they call me at 2 o'clock on Monday and say, Major Rich, you need to come in and sign for a letter. The first thing out of my mouth was, I did this a week ago.
I already got this letter. Check the dates.
Yeah. And they're like, no, sir, you have to do it again. And I said, what time does the clinic close? And they said 3. I said, you understand that it's 2. By the time I come in, it takes me a half hour to get to where you are. By the time I come in, get the letter, and go to the clinic, it may be closed.
No one cares. The government does not care. Obviously, you are a drug addict if you can't get there in an hour.
Well, actually, they were outside the window of when they could legally tell me to do it. And I pushed them back a little bit, and they gave me till the next day. I did it the next day. So I am now double free from drugs. Thank you, Air Force.
Well, you had that whole 24 or that whole 12-hour period, which you could have gone and done some drugs if you wanted to get kicked out that way.
Well, do you think, I wonder if that happens. I wonder if people get a drug test and be like, all right, I've been tested. Now I can go on a bender.
Well, do you know what actually, this is a thing. I have heard that if you are drug tested, you have a higher weighted average to be tested again within the next 30 days for that exact reason. First of all. Second of all, though, I will say that I have heard some of the background stuff is that the Air Force doesn't want to pay for individual drug tests for the hundreds of people that it tests every week.
Yes.
So they take large batches and kind of pour everybody's bodily fluids into that bucket that I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
And they test
and
the
then
whole
if
bucket.
It pops hot, then they got to go back and individually test every member of that batch.
Exactly. But the problem with that is there is a possibility that by that time it has worked its way out of your system.
Yeah. So they're in a hurry to do it again, I guess.
Yeah. So it's possible that somebody in your first batch actually did pop hot, and then you had to go do it again just to make sure that it wasn't you.
Well, and I texted you and told you I got karma for giving you a hard time because you'd said it previously on the podcast that you got picked like 4 times in 6 months.
Yeah, I was drug tested at least once every 6 weeks for the entire time that I was at the 82nd Comm Squadron.
Okay. Well, you had a healthy helping of government bureaucracy this week. I understand you took your CPA exam?
I did. I did take my CPA exam, Ben. I can't talk specifically what was on the test. I agreed on this very official-looking screen that, yea, verily, if you discuss any of the contents of this test, you could forfeit your right to be a CPA.
You signed an anti-cheating non-disclosure agreement. Okay.
Yeah, that's what I did. Yeah, but it was this is the first of 4 tests, and I'm totally on the fence. I have no clue if I passed or not.
When will you find out?
Mid-June, I will find out. And so until then, I don't know if I passed, so I can't really study for the next test. But I don't know if I passed, so I can't really keep studying for this test. That could possibly be a waste of time. So I'm just going to enjoy the next couple of weeks and not study for 2 hours a day every day for my life and get burned out anymore. I'm just going to relax and enjoy this time that I have.
Once you've taken the first one, do you have a certain amount of time to take the rest of them?
If you pass, the first test that you pass starts a 2-year clock. And then you have to pass the other 3 for it to be valid.
Okay. So when someone gets CPA behind their name, it means they passed 4 tests within a 2-year period.
And I will tell you right now, Ben, that CPA means something, at least when they got it. Obviously, there's diminishing returns and there's that long tail that happens. But you have to do continuing education, so many hours a year to maintain the certification over time. But I will say this is one of 4 tests. I like to take the hardest one first. It's about financial accounting and reporting. And I'm not kidding when I say this one test, studying for it was like retaking my entire graduate school degree within the 6 months that I spent studying for it, because it covers everything. And it's no joke. One question on the test can be about how cash flows, and the next question can be about how the government accounts for building bridges. It's just all over the place.
Okay, I got a question for you about this.
Okay.
Is part of the degree of difficulty you're assigning to this your diminished mental capacity that it's come with age? What if you were doing this when you were 23?
What if I was... first of all, I'm insulted that you think I'm not as sharp today as I was when I was 23.
Come on, man.
I'll have you know. I will. There's probably more on my plate. I am taking it more seriously. So I don't know. It's a trade-off thing. Everything is a trade-off. I am taking it way more seriously now that as an adult, as a professional accountant, as a provider and a husband that realizes that I need to progress my career and continue making all that bread so I can pay for my kids to go to college and all that. So I take it seriously, and I try not to slack. But when I was 23, I remember when I first tried to get my master's degree, when I first got out of the Air Force Academy, and I took literally one class and said, I can't handle any more school right now. And I quit getting it. And then I didn't try to get it after that for many, many years.
Yeah. So how long ago did you finish your you got like a master's in accounting or something like that?
I got a master's of science in accountancy. Yes.
How long ago was that?
And I graduated with that last April, in April of 2020.
Okay. Is the amount of time you delayed from graduating that class and taking this exam because of COVID?
No. The amount of time I took, first of all, from April till about November, I just was slacking because I just come off of 2 years of doing grad school every day after work, and I was burned out. And then from November, I originally, so it's this long process. You have to sign up with the National Accountant Board, and I really should know the name of it, but I don't off the top of my head. There's so many different boards, and this one is the one that tracks like all of the applicants. So first of all, you have to apply to your state board with its giant application, and they have to sign off and say, yes, you have the education and the background necessary to be a certified public accountant. They send your application to the national board. They do the same review, and they come back and tell you, yes, you are allowed to take the test. And then you have to apply and say, okay, well, I want to take this test, or I want to take these tests in particular. And then they send you back a notice to schedule. It's like, okay, we have authorized you to schedule the tests that you specifically requested, and you have to take them in the next 6 months. And so I applied for that back in December of 2020, and they gave me 6 months. And originally, I was planning on taking the test in April, but I didn't schedule it because I had I had up until like the end of June to actually schedule the test. But I didn't actually schedule it because I just wanted to let me do like a month's worth of studying and see how I do, because I did pay for one of those super advanced study programs that like tracks your progress and tells you how far along you are for any individual test.
Like you took practice tests or something?
Yes, they broke it down. They sent me 4 textbooks in the mail. They have an online thing. It's great. But this one textbook per test. And it's not like one of those textbooks like you had in college or high school where you highlight one line out of a paragraph on a page.
Right.
Like this is every highlighted line out of every textbook from every accounting class you've ever had. And so every word of this textbook is critical to you passing this test. And so it's basically, it's shove this book into your head and retain all of it, because
like 800 pages.
Yeah, some of accounting.
Wow.
So anyway,
sounds
a couple
like thrilling reading, gripping.
It's really not. A couple months into it, I realized I'm going to need way more time than I allotted myself, and so I pushed the test. I actually did schedule the test because I needed a hard deadline to take it seriously, and I scheduled it for the end of May. And I thought to myself, well, that'll be fine. We'll be done with tax season halfway through April, and I'll have 6 weeks to like really focus and study up and cram right before the test. And then tax season got extended into mid-May. So that 6 weeks that I was planning to really knuckle down, I had 5 days.
Life is what happens while you're busy making other plans.
Right. Anyway, so I don't know if I passed. I'll find out in mid-June. I'm enjoying the downtime in the interim.
All right. Well, I will follow up with you in the next episode we record after you find out the result.
So this is an interesting thing that happened while I was taking the test. Is the last question the last set of questions that I answered. I just know that I tanked them because they were asking me very specific things about a subject that I did not have a very strong grasp of at that moment at the end of the 4 hours sitting in that room. And so now
4 hours.
Yes, I could have taken a 15-minute break, but because of COVID and the lockdown pandemic, I wasn't allowed to use like the restroom or the water fountain, so I just decided to skip it and kept going with the test. Anyway, it skewed my whole perspective of the test because the last handful of questions I know I got wrong, and so now my brain can't help but focus on those as like the negativity bias. So I really think I might have bombed the whole test, but I really don't know because I can't trust my own feelings on it.
Wow. Well, we'll be in suspense until we find out the result.
I will literally dance a jig if I pass this test.
You know, something you said about how hard it was and having respect for someone that is a CPA, meaning that they completed this at some point in the past, reminded me of this scene from Catch Me If You Can. And I've seen the movie and read the book. You know what I'm talking about?
I do know what you're talking about. I've seen the movie. I did not know it was a book.
Yeah, it is originally just a memoir by Frank Abagnale Jr., who's a heck of a guy. You know, he's a notorious con man and check forger who had this just storied life where he was flying around in aircraft as if he were a pilot and working at a hospital as if he were a doctor, and he was never any of those things.
Just social engineering his way through life.
Yeah, anyway, at one point he becomes a lawyer, and in order to be a lawyer, you got to pass the bar, which I understand is similar to this. And there's a scene where Tom Hanks, as FBI agent Carl Hanratty, is investigating Frank, and he's got him locked up, and he's like, Frank, I got to know something. Like, I know how you faked being a pilot, and I know how you faked being a doctor, but how on earth did you pass the bar?
Yeah, how did you cheat on the bar exam?
And Frank's like, I didn't cheat. I studied my butt off and passed it.
Which goes to show you that yes, he was a successful con man, and like just this.
But he was also really smart.
But he was also, he had to be very smart and a fast talker in order to get out of these situations. So clearly, if he did decide to apply himself by passing the bar legitimately, he could have just been a lawyer. But it's fine. It's probably more exciting to be an international con man.
Yeah, good movie. Recommend it. Book's good too. Speaking of tests you have to pass, a year ago when all the COVID kicked off and they started restricting everything, the military was in a really rough way because part of maintaining a fighting force is the requiring annual or every 6 months physical testing examinations to make sure you're in prime physical condition.
Let's be clear. The Army maintains a fighting force. The Marine Corps maintains a fighting force. The Air Force...
Okay, so the Chair Force has an annual exam that you have to pass that consists of 4 components: a waist measurement, push-ups, sit-ups, and a 1.5-mile run. Each the first 3 are, waist measurement was 20 points, push-ups were 10 points, sit-ups were 10 points, and run was 60 points for a total of 100 points. You had to pass each individual component individually as well as an aggregate passing score. If you were marginal, they'd make you take it every 6 months. If you were excellent, you could take it once a year. So I was in excellent status a year ago when all the COVID stuff hit, and they said, well, we can't be in the same location and touching people, maintain all the social distancing and COVID restrictions. So until further notice, all physical fitness testing is on hold.
And what's funny is there's a bell curve here. There's a handful of people who are like, no, I was going to max it and get the higher scores, because there is that weird 1,000 club or whatever, the weird psycho gym rat people that like take the charts for the score and they extend it out beyond what the human limits are, and they try to get even higher points than you could possibly get.
Those guys.
That's on the one end of the scale. And on the other end of the scale is everybody that was barely scraping by, like, oh, well, I have a waiver for the run because my foot hurts. That just, I imagine, pulled the ripcord and just blew up 30 pounds.
The people that vomit at the end of the test because they hadn't run like that in a year.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah, those guys. So everybody's been postponed. Finally, things are starting to let up now with the social distancing, COVID restrictions, immunization, all that stuff. And the Air Force announced they're going to be restarting PT tests in July. And along with that, they've revised the test. They took the opportunity to revise it, and they made some much needed revisions. One of which was introducing 5-year increments for the relaxation of the standards as you get older instead of decade-based increments, which is good.
Yes, because there is a big difference between a 21-year-old and a 29-year-old.
Right. And it was the worst when I was a 39-year-old and I had to follow the same standards as the 29-year-olds. It was really tough.
Oof. Yeah, that's... Oh, I don't even want to stay up past 10 You got these, these
Yeah,
guys
exactly.
trying to take that test.
So to give our listeners an example, to get an excellent at that age, you need to do 48 push-ups, I think, 55 sit-ups, both in a minute. You have to have a waist measurement of under 35 and a half, and you have to run 1.5 miles in less than 13 minutes.
And here's the thing, like 1.5 miles in 13 minutes sounds okay, but that's clipping. Like that's not a slacking pace. Like that's not a relaxing pace. That is, you are pushing every step of that run.
It's a little over 2-minute laps around the track.
So it's like 8-minute miles. Like that's legit.
Anyway, I'm glad they removed the waist component. So now it basically doubled the amount that the push-ups and sit-ups are worth. So now those are worth 20 points each, and the run's still worth 60. And I won't be scheduled for a while. They'll get all the backlog of the low bell curve people, and once they get through all those, then they'll look at the people who had got an excellent a year ago.
What are they going to do? Move you to Louisiana and then force you to retire?
This needs to be a recurring theme.
This needs to be your mantra, man. What are they like? What can they do? What can they do to me? Like you're scot-free at this point.
I'm not yet in the scot-free window, Josh. The timeline for how fast they can accelerate and force you out of the military is faster than the amount of time I have left.
That is no. That is absolutely not true, because if anybody comes down and is like, we are going to kick you out early, you can just look them right in the eye and say, it's because I'm old, isn't it? And they have to freeze everything and start that discrimination investigation that's going to drag on for months.
Or I could just stay fit and not get in trouble. All right, let's talk bad at parenting.
Bad at parenting. So who was bad at parenting this week?
You, apparently.
Oh, crap, it was me. Okay, well, this is, I don't know if this is bad at parenting, but it fits into the parenting genre. So there I was, Ben. My wife and I, this is our standard, I was not inverted, but this is our standard evening. You're
in the front leaning rest.
There I was in the front leaning rest. I'm having flashbacks to the academy. Stop it. No. Our evening typically goes, we'll have dinner, we'll clean up the kitchen, we'll do stuff with the kids. Either we'll play some games with them, and then we'll read books and things. We're actually reading through The Willoughbys right now, and I love doing the voices for the Willoughbys. And the book The Willoughbys is hilarious. This is a side note for everybody. The Willoughbys is
adding that to my reading list.
Yeah, it's a Netflix movie that is adorable and cute. And I encourage people to watch it. But then my wife bought the actual book, The Willoughbys, and we've been reading it. And the book is different enough from the movie that it's interesting to read still, even though we know kind of what's going to happen. And it's just hilarious how terrible these parents are in this book. It makes me feel good about the way I parent my children. Like, the parents go on vacation, and then they send a postcard back saying, oh, by the way, we've hired a real estate agent to sell the house because we need more money because we want to stay on vacation.
So get it. So prep the house, kids.
They told him, like, go hide in the coal bin whenever somebody comes to look at the house.
Wow.
So anyway,
world's worst parents.
So we read The Willoughbys, we put the kids to bed, and then my wife and I usually stay up for another hour and a half or so, watch it, and we'll watch TV together, or we'll do some kind of activity together as married couples do. Well, we were watching a show. I don't recall what the show was, and it's not important to the story, but at one point we're watching it, and my wife goes, Carter, what are you doing? And I look over, and there's my son standing in the archway into the living room, and it's well past his bedtime. He should have been asleep hours ago. And he's just staring at us this weird blank look in his face, and then kind of doing this little dance, just shifting foot to foot, really awkwardly and very quickly. We're like, what's the matter? And he walked up to us and stood a foot from us on the couch, not saying a word. Carter, what's the matter with you? Nothing. Deadpan face. Are you okay? Are you hurt?
I've seen this movie. Was he holding a knife?
He was not holding a knife. And then he's still doing the dance. And then I go, do you have to go to the bathroom? And then he looks at me for a second, and then he turns, and he does the ninja run. And when I say that, he bends at the waist, and he put his arms straight back behind him, and he ran off into the other room.
The Naruto run.
Yeah, and I look at my wife, and I'm like, what is happening? And so then I got up, and I followed him, and he ran into his room, and he immediately took his pajama shorts off, and then he opened his drawer and started pulling clothes out. I'm like, what are you doing? He goes, getting dressed. And then he puts another pair of underpants on over his underpants. And then he stands back up, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he just looks at me blank face again. I'm like, do you have to go to the bathroom? And then he rushes past me, and he goes into the bathroom, and the door shuts. And then I hear the bathroom noises. And I'm standing outside the bathroom listening to this, and my wife is there, and we're both kind of laughing, and I'm glad, Ben, I'm honestly glad that she was there, because he was freaking me out. Like, I have no idea what's going on. He's not responding to my questions. Is this the haunting? I don't know. Is my kid going to, like, turn his head 360 degrees and, like, spring up and walk on the ceiling for a while? I'm getting a little worried, but my wife thought it was hilarious the whole time.
So what's the verdict? What are you calling it?
Well, here's what happened. After we hear the toilet flush, and he washes his hands, and he comes out and he looks at us, and he goes, "What are you guys doing?" And we're like,
"Why are you in my room?"
And we're like, "Yeah, what are you doing?" And he goes, "I was going to the bathroom." And I look at him and I go, "What's 2 + 2?" And he goes, 4, and starts laughing at me like I'm the one that's being weird.
Yeah.
And then my wife goes,
"But you had a witness."
Yeah, like, why are you wearing 2 pairs of underpants? And he goes, "No, I'm not." And he looks down and stops because, 1, he's not wearing pants. And 2, he is clearly wearing 2 pairs of underpants, one over the other. And he has no memory of anything that happened before he went to the bathroom.
Okay.
Now, this is not the first time.
Okay, I was going to say, is this the first time?
This is the first time, like, he came out and, like, drew his attention to us. Like, there was another time before, and this had to be almost a year ago now, where my wife was checking on him and wanted him to come out of the bed and go to the bathroom for the reasons that you need little kids to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night.
Right.
And she like came to me and was like, "Can you get him out of his bed? Because he's in a bunk bed that we built for him, so he's way up high and she can't really reach up there." And so I was like, "Sure." And I go in there and I shake him like, "Hey, Carter." And he like looks at me with that deadpan expression again, like, "You need to go to the bathroom." And he like starts crawling out of the bed, and he crawls down the ladder, and he gets to the base of the ladder, and he stands there and he turns around and he looks at both of us, and then he turns right back around and starts climbing back up the ladder. And we had to like, no. And we like grab him and like turn him and like shove him into the bathroom. And then like muscle memory took over and then he did his thing. But so apparently I guess the punchline of this whole thing is my son sleepwalks.
Yeah, well, okay, so apparently there's something about the human brain where like the part of your mind that wakes you up when you got to go to the bathroom doesn't wake you up all the way, because that's what's triggering it.
Something. That is the thing that is getting him up and moving. But then I'm thinking what happened is he was going to the bathroom and then heard us watching TV. And then like his sleeping brain came over to see what we were doing.
Okay, so I had only one of my 6 children do this same behavior you're describing.
Okay.
And it was the same kind of circumstances. And our first time as well, we were just mystified and couldn't figure out what was going on. We're sitting there, in the lovely hours after the kids have already gone to bed. He comes in the room with a blank expression on his face. We both kind of look at each other like, "Jairus, what are you doing? Do you need to go to the bathroom?" And then he kind of disappeared. And we hear him go into the kitchen and open the dishwasher. And I follow him in there, and he's peeing into the dishwasher. I guess to him it was enough like going into the bathroom and opening the toilet.
This is not what you were supposed to be doing, this son.
So, that was actually kind of a self-solving problem. Like, just close the dishwasher, run a cycle, and it was all gone. But after that, if we ever saw him up roaming around, I would bodily move him into the bathroom and make sure he was started before I released custody.
Because clearly that's where he's going, or trying to go.
Right.
After this happened, my wife started doing all the things that good mothers do. I didn't. I just wrote it off as that was weird. Let's hope it never happens again. But my wife did the thing where she starts reading about it and figuring out, is this a problem? What do we need to look for? And they say, "Oh, you're not supposed to wake up sleepwalkers." And I immediately discounted that. I don't care. If that kid's walking around with the possibility of peeing in a vessel that is not a toilet, I'm going to wake him up.
You can add this to your ammunition now and be like, "Ben's kid peed in the dishwasher." You want that to happen?
And I'm going to do it. Ben's kid peed in the dishwasher, and I'm not having it. So, the punchline that I got from this is like, if we see him walking around and he's acting weird, shove him in the bathroom, and hopefully it'll take care of itself. The other end of it, though, was she's talking about like, oh, some people can like leave their house or like start doing stuff. And I'm like, oh, that's a problem. I don't want him.
Does he normally leave the house?
I mean, he hasn't for like a year now.
Okay.
But our house does have like really high child locks on the doors that we can activate. So it's just like a little metal flap that flips over and locks into place.
So you can lock them in.
So we can lock them in. And so I have been doing that at night, is locking in the main doors in and out of the house.
All right. But as long as you didn't wander into the pool.
If he wakes me up, and I think my kids know this, because if I wake up and my kid is standing right over me on the bed, I'm gonna punch him. And it's not because like I don't love them, but it's because I'm going to be terrified in that moment, and it's going to be fight or flight.
Yeah, I've seen that video a lot of times on the internet.
Well, on a more serious note, I am a little worried that like I'm going to hear rustling or some kind of rummaging. Like if he goes in the kitchen and starts doing stuff, like I'm going to come out of my bedroom with a pistol, because I do keep a pistol in a safe in my bedroom for that specific circumstance. You hear
Don't point your gun at your child, Josh.
Well, I'm not going to mean to, but if he's walking around sleepwalking, I'm going to think it's some meth head or something broken in a house looking for... who knows what? You see these
now you can add a possibility to your list of bad things that could happen, and it could just be he's peeing in the dishwasher.
I was really looking forward to just flat murdering somebody that broke into my house, but now I've got to take the time to identify them and see if they're a threat. Like, I don't know, Ben. That sounds like a hassle.
I think that's a good transition point for Bad at Logic.
I don't see how, but okay, we'll roll with it.
Okay, so every other week we do either a logical fallacy or a bias. Last week we did a logical fallacy, so this week it's time for a bias, and that is yours.
And I am the biased one. And what's really disgusting is every time I look through these cards that are biases, like just the word bias, it feels negative. And I realize I exhibit like all of these biases. So I guess it's
don't we all?
I mean, theoretically, no, we're not supposed to.
The point of doing these is thinking about our own thinking so that we can be master of it.
And it is, like we talk about every time, like the key about this stuff is that it's almost impossible to identify in yourself unless you're really looking for it. And so I know for a fact this is something that I'm not going to say suffer from, but have experienced.
Okay, so this week's bias is?
This week's bias is declinism. And the description that's on here is, you remember the past as better than it was, and expect the future to be worse than evidence suggests it will be.
Okay.
So a little bit of that is confirmation bias. So the way people's memories work is that you tend to remember high points and low points, but not usually the stuff that's in the middle. Like a normal mediocre day usually gets washed away in the long-term memory. You don't remember that stuff. You remember the big things that happen to you, whether they're good or bad. And then the other part that happens is people like to defend themselves or like to protect their own psyches. And we have these self-defense mechanisms that try to either explain away or in the most radical cases, you alter your own memories to perceive the past as better than it was for you. Like if you did something super embarrassing, there's ways that people spin that and change the story to the point where they don't remember what originally happened. They just remember the story that they're telling themselves.
Right. So declinism is like looking at the past in a way that's kind of nostalgic and then being pessimistic about the future.
Yes. And so I don't know.
Everything's in decline.
Yeah. It's just, we're just going downhill. And long-term listeners may have picked up on the very subtle tendency that I have to somewhat be a little negative about things.
You potentially could be suffering from the declinism bias.
I could be. I don't know if I am, because I also think the past was terrible. I just think the future is going to be more terrible. So, but I'm definitely suffering from at least a version of this.
Well, to help you evaluate your thinking, I sent you an audiobook on Audible called Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker. So maybe if you read it and you're interested, we might talk about it on the show.
I don't have the best track record of reading like self-help books that people hand me. Like you could really benefit from changing the way your brain works. So you should read this.
It is in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, that in itself, taken the wrong way, is sort of an attack on, hey, you're already wrong. Try this to make you better.
Sorry, Josh, I'll let you hang on to your biases from now on.
That's the thing is, like, I think I've defended a couple of these biases. We're like, I suffer from this, but I think it's
you've
fine.
Defended all of them.
And that's less about the bias and more about me. That's more about my fragile ego can't handle the idea that my thinking is flawed in some fundamental way. Because obviously, Ben, look at me. Audience, listen to my voice. How could I be anything but perfect and flawless in every possible way? And to be confronted with the idea that the things that are 100% under my control might be wrong, that's a direct attack on the core of my being. I can't possibly accept that.
That's right. That reminds me of that webcomic of the guy who finally finds the scroll of truth.
That's a great meme, because it doesn't matter what's on the scroll of truth. And everybody like wipes out the third panel and writes whatever they want in the scroll of truth. And the fourth panel is that guy hucking the scroll of truth off in the distance. Yeah. No. I had an NCO
I don't want to know the truth.
I was a very young officer, and I had an NCO tell me, the truth will set you free. But first, it's going to piss you off.
Ooh, that's a good one.
It's one of my favorites.
I'm making that into a little image macro. We'll put that in the photo album.
Ooh, look forward to that on our Facebook page, listeners.
It's time for Bad at English. So this is going to be a quick one. It's a phrase I heard the British say that kind of raised my eyebrow, made me get out my notebook and write it down. And the phrase is clear as chips.
Clear as chips.
Clear as chips.
Well, now, chips are French fries for the Brits, aren't they?
That's right. That's the first thing you have to know. And they're not just regular French fries. They're big, fat, flat French fries most of the time.
So like what we would call steak fries.
Like steak fries, like you get at Red Robin. So
okay.
when they say clear as chips, they're talking about big, fat steak fries. Now, obviously, characteristically, chips are not clear. And in context, this is the same as an American might say that was clear as mud.
Okay.
That's all it means. But they don't say clear as mud, they say clear as chips.
England. I'm speaking to the entire country of England now. Like, stop it. Stop it. We have perfected some of these sayings. You're doing it wrong. Just stop it.
I wonder if they said clear as mud first, and then we adopted it, and then they changed it clear as chips, and then they act like we're the weird ones.
That sounds like something Britain would do.
They did that with soccer.
Well, Britain has a tendency to change everything in the whole world and then back off and be like, I don't know why everything's so screwed up.
All right, it's time to transition to our main feature today. And as I mentioned last time, I wanted to talk to you about my behavior management plan that I use for parenting my children.
So I love that right off the bat. This is going to be like I'm have a split brain on this entire topic, because like on one part, like I cannot, like just the fact that you called it this is my behavior management system just feels like something you pulled a 3-inch 3-ring binder off of a shelf and flipped to section 1.1, which has the for official use only statement on the page. This is explaining how the rich family administers behavioral control and development over the long term. And then the other part of my brain is that what parenting is in the rich household? Is it this systematic, and do we go to the manual every time stuff happens?
So those are good questions, and you've been my friend for most of the time that I've been a parent. And you were there, I think, when the genesis of all this was happening. And I was just doing like any parent does. You're just making it up as you go along. You're doing the best that you can. You're trying to figure things out. And I remember saying to you, Josh, I'm having this problem with the kids' behavior, and I'm trying to fix it. And here's what I'm thinking about doing. And then you would wax philosophical and share all kinds of informed opinions and stuff.
Okay.
And every now and then you'd have a little gem of wisdom.
I will say that I do recall Monday night quarterbacking the crap out of being a parent when I was a single bachelor living my best life. So that is one of 1,000 ways that young Josh needed to just shut his mouth.
You know what, though? That's the great thing about talking to you. You don't let the fact that you don't know about something burden you into not having an opinion about it.
I think that's one of the biases we can talk about in another week.
Well, so necessity is the mother of invention, and when you have your fourth and then fifth and then sixth children, and when I knew you at first, I was having my fourth and fifth children. And the thing about that time period, when we had so many young children, is you transition from a man-to-man to a zone defense.
I have heard that before, yes.
Yes, and I'll give you a good example of the kind of thing that would happen. So once our kids start getting old enough that when we would take them all to church on Sunday. The way our church meetings were set up is for the first part, you meet together as a family, and then for the second part, you split up into age groups. And so our children would be spread out in rooms all around our meeting house. And then after all of the meetings were over, then we had to try to gather them and get in the car. And when our church buildings are usually shaped in like a horseshoe or an oval with the chapel in the center, and then all the classrooms are around the outside. And so my wife and I would kind of meet in the center and be like, okay, I'll go around one side, you go around the other side, we'll gather children the whole way, and then we'll meet at the other end, and hopefully we have everyone.
And it's like you rode horses and had cowboy hats and said, "Yeah!"
Yeah. So what happened is generally that was ineffective, but it would help get the job done. And it'd take us 10 minutes, which is too long, but reasonable. And then I deployed. And Alicia would still go to church and the children would still scatter for classes. But now there was just one person and she would go all the way around and not find one and then lose one. And then, and it would take her 20, 30 minutes. And
How do you lose one?
Because you got like this chain of humans and there's other people in the hallway and then you look around and one of them's missing and they're playing the piano in the classroom or something like that. So she came up with a system where she assigned each of the older children to one of the younger children and made sure they knew where the younger children's classroom was. And then as soon as classes came out, the older child would go get their paired up younger child and bring them to the car. And her system was faster than two grown-ups.
She implemented accountability buddies.
Yes, exactly. And that lasted throughout their childhood. Then when we were on we go to an amusement park or go out for the day or something like that, the older kid, you make sure your younger kid has sign screen on or remembers a raincoat or whatever, those kinds of things. And it lasted and lasted. But while I was still there, it was like we were getting by well enough that we didn't have to come up with a system, and so we didn't.
I mean, that makes sense. Like you said, necessity is the mother of invention. If you didn't need a formalized system, then why would you invent one?
Right. So if you got an only child, you can just kind of make it up as you go along, do the best you can, and you don't feel a need. But once we started having our fifth and sixth children, we were like, okay, we got to come up with a system because we just don't have the energy, the time, or the resources to really be able to help make each one of these children become a better person.
I'm glad you phrased it that way. Because down to 5 or 6, I don't have the energy to even teach this one anymore. Let's just have the older ones impart all the wisdom because I'm not giving that same spiel again.
Yeah, we just needed what the Air Force calls a force multiplier. Something to take our skills and knowledge as a parent and multiply it on all of the children. So that's what this system is. It isn't like we sat down before we started having children, we wrote all this out in a continuity binder. That's not it at all. It's the first time something went wrong and we just didn't have the energy. We're like, okay, we need to make this more formal and make it more automatic so that we can still be good parents without everything falling apart.
Is that the goal, though? Is that really the goal, to be good parents or to generate good children? Because those are different goals.
Yes, so that's the first thing I want to talk about. So I'm gonna touch on. Okay, so I got my bachelor's and master's in education, and so I've taken a lot of psychology courses, and I'm going to touch on some of the actual formal theories of psychology as I talk about this. But I wasn't actually referring to those guys; it was just kind of in me while we were planning this. So there's a branch of psychology called behaviorism. Frequently, when you're talking about behaviorism, a lot of the experimentation that's done is on pigeons or rats or dogs. You're familiar with Pavlov and his dogs, that kind of thing. I'm going to talk about tiny humans, but you can apply it anywhere. So if you're listening and you're not a parent, you can apply this in the workplace, you can apply this in the classroom, and you can apply this with your significant other.
Sub footnote, implement psychological behavior modification on your spouse at your own risk. We are taking no liability for that.
All right, so here are the things we knew up to this point. Number one is, while you're kind of making it up as you go along as a parent, we learned early on that the death of good parenting is inconsistency.
Okay.
Whatever it is you're doing, just be consistent about it. Kids understand that. Their brains can wrap around it. But if you get mad about one thing one day and don't the next, they go nuts. They just go nuts.
Okay, so how do you reconcile that fact, the idea of consistency? Because I agree. In every parenting book you ever see, and every teacher, every expert will tell you, just be consistent. But at the same time, it's been proven psychologically that you get better results and more consistent behavior from irregular feedback. For example, slot machines are a prime example of this. People will pump money over and over into slot machines because it's a random chance that they will win versus a set fixed probability.
That's perfect, Josh. And what you're talking about is what's called the reinforcement schedule. And gambling follows what's known to have the reinforcement schedule with the highest cumulative number of responses, which is called variable ratio. And in variable ratio reinforcement schedules, you have reinforcement occurring on average for every n responses, but not always the same. Like if you're pulling the arm on a slot machine, it's going to reward you every now and then, but you never know how many times you have to pull the arm in the slot machine until it rewards you. That has the highest incident of increasing the behavior.
Okay. So how does that reconcile?
Until you run out of money.
So how does that reconcile with your being consistent as a parent?
I'll talk about it because we actually utilized for some of the things a variable ratio reinforcement schedule.
Okay, before we move on, I have to say this was not scripted. Like I am literally like throwing these questions at Ben as they occur to me, and he threw vocabulary words back at me, and I'm just as astounded as you are, listeners. Like seriously, that was ridiculous. But please, Ben, continue. Very impressive.
But a variable ratio reinforcement schedule is not inconsistency.
Okay.
It's consistency on a variable ratio.
So the reward itself is consistent. It is just delivered, or the feedback itself is consistent. It is just delivered on a variable rate.
Right. There's lots of ways you can be inconsistent as a parent. Like I said, it's trouble one time, not trouble the next, or say you're going to do something and don't. One that always comes to mind that I made a decision early on never do with my kids is make a threat to a child that you either don't want to or cannot fulfill.
That one is a trap because then I've recognized that as a trap because I have done this where I will threaten my children with a punishment that I know full and well that I am not going to implement.
Classic dad thing. Quiet back there. I'm going to turn this car around.
Well, I pick up all these Legos or I'm going to throw them in the trash. And in the back of my head, I'm like, I am physically incapable of throwing away Legos. They are too expensive and I love them too much. But they need to like at some point I
hope you don't say that. Do you actually say that?
I don't anymore because I recognized because I thought to myself like if they ever call my bluff, I'm really out on a ledge here.
So here's what you have to do, Josh. Pick something that's really shocking and right on the border and look for an opportunity for shock and awe. I love these as a father. I love these.
Oh, this is the idea where like if you have a group of people and like you just I was told this when I went to train with the training instructors at Lackland Air Force Base when you're for basic training for people that are coming in joining the military. They said, it was a lot better when we could hit them. Because all you had to do is you get them all off the bus right off the bat, and the first person that did anything wrong, you just slap him so hard he went to the ground, and then all of them were so scared of getting slapped for the next 3 weeks that they were perfect recruits.
Yeah. Well, now they'll have to be more creative since they can't do that anymore. And that is a great example of a type of punishment which is called a positive punishment, which is the presenting of a negative stimulus in order to reduce undesired behavior.
Yes, let's get this clear because these are always so tricky because you always hear about positive feedback and things and people use them wrong all the time. The idea here is that a punishment is supposed to be a positive is in these terms is a positive reinforcement because it is something that you actively did that is caused by behavior.
Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. In behaviorism, there's a branch of psychology. Classical conditioning is Pavlov and his dogs. We're not going to talk about that today. It's interesting, but we're not going to. Psychologist B.F. Skinner, who was the early 20th century, pioneered something that's now called operant conditioning. Operant conditioning has two types of things that you can do, either reinforcement, which is to increase a behavior, or punishment, which is to decrease a behavior, or extinction, which is to have a behavior go away altogether. But so you're deliberately trying to either reinforce a desired behavior or to punish an undesired behavior. And for each one of those two, there's positive and negative. So for positive reinforcement, that means you present something desirable when they do the good behavior.
Okay.
And then negative reinforcement is when you remove something they don't like when they do a good behavior.
Oh, okay. Negative reinforcement is the removal of something negative to reinforce good behavior. Okay, got it.
Yes. For instance, like when I was a kid, when my mom wanted me to wake up in the morning, she would come into my room and she would sing off key. And she would continue singing off key until I got out of bed.
That's the weirdest and most horrifying way to wake somebody up.
That's negative reinforcement.
What song
I'm going to stand here and sing until you get it's a song called In the Leafy Treetops. In the leafy treetops, the birds sing good morning. There first to see the sun, they must tell everyone. I can close my eyes anytime I want and hear my mom singing that song.
All right, this is interesting. Okay. Like, I gotta say this. Like, it ties into the idea that never pick your favorite song as the alarm on your phone that you're gonna wake up to, because whatever you set your alarm that wakes you up in the morning, right, you're gonna hate that for the rest of your life.
Right. That's classical conditioning. That's Pavlov. Okay. So then under punishment, when you want to decrease a behavior, punishment isn't always negative. There's positive punishment, which is to present a negative stimulus, i.e. spanking, yelling, something like that,
pure
giving
fear.
Something bad that they don't like. And then negative punishment or a penalty, which is to take away something desirable.
Okay.
Like, if you do that, I will take away your favorite toy. Or teenager, you're grounded from the car.
No screens for however long because you are yelling at your brother. That may have happened
take away
today.
something positive. So there's basically 4 branch. It's just imagine one of those quad charts where on one axis you have reinforcement and punishment, and then on the other axis you have positive and negative.
Okay, I really don't want to derail you because you're on a roll, but I have to tell this story about Skinner because I have a great story about Skinner, the psychologist.
Okay, go ahead. B.F. Skinner.
Right, so, like so many other people during this time in the world, he had huge government grant money because he was doing a lot of his research during World War II. And a lot of the conditioning that he did was on pigeons and like how to train pigeons to do specific tasks.
Yes.
Pigeons are way smarter than you think they are. But specifically, he they built this system, and it blows my mind. And there are videos of it all over the internet. You can look it up. They're released classified government videos from the 1940s where they would lock a pigeon in a little box, and they put a video or at the time whatever a projection of a battleship was like from the air, and the pigeon was trained through operant conditioning to peck at the battleship on the screen at wherever it moved on the screen, because then it was going to get fed at the end of the whole thing, right? But what they built a system, an analog system, where these pigeons would be strapped into front of bombs, and as they this would not be a projection, it would be an actual image. They would drop these bombs at enemy battleships, and the pigeon would peck the screen where the battleship was, and that would, through analog whatever digital wizardry, make the bomb fly towards whatever the pigeon was pecking at. Like, he was using pigeons to create the world's first guided weapons.
Bombs.
In World War II. They never...
That's awesome.
They didn't implement it. Like, it never came to fruition. They never actually made that system. But there are videos of these pigeons doing that simulation over and over perfectly every time.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense to me, because now we read those research papers that are based on that, and for some reason there's this logical jump that's happening where we say, well, if we can teach pigeons to do this, then that must also work on humans. But it makes a lot more sense to think that they weren't trying to learn things about humans by experimenting on pigeons. We were trying to make bombs.
Yes. No, this is the thing. It's like, oh, we had all of this science that was aimed at the war, and then after it was over and all the grant money dried up, they're like, well, we learned a lot of stuff. Maybe this applies elsewhere.
Okay, it kind of does. So I talked about, those 4 branches of operant conditioning, but I want to back up a step. There was another contemporary of B.F. Skinner by the name of Jean Piaget, and this is like the context. So if operant conditioning are the 4 things you can do: positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, negative punishment, the context is the fact that human beings develop in stages. He divided it into 4 distinct stages, and sometimes they're subdivided beyond that. But basically, the first stage is sensory motor, it's called, from birth to age 2, where you're just like learning how to use your body.
That makes sense, yeah. Because you always see babies and stuff kicking around, and like there are those. All right, if you're not a parent, then just ignore what I'm saying. But if you're a parent, you remember those moments where you saw your child look at their hand and look at the thing, And like you could see them conjure all of the tiny willpower that they had. Like, I will make these fingers close around the thing that I want on the first try.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, and of course, you can't take someone that's in that stage of development and have them develop like complex morality based on knowledge of social norms and expectations and that kind of thing. You're just teaching them like, don't touch this, it's hot.
Yeah, yes, and I recognize. Like you are not mentally developed enough for me to explain the complex social behavior that you are exhibiting. You're just not allowed to point out people's features. Like you're not allowed to call them fat, even if they are fat. You just listen to me. What I'm saying, I'll explain it to you later.
Exactly. So the next phase from about age 2 to age 7 is called pre-operational. And there they're starting to gain understanding of concrete concepts and object permanence and all those kinds of things. Then from about 7 to 11, the preteen years is what's called concrete operational. They're starting to understand societal interaction. And then the final stage is called formal operation from 11 till about 16 and on, where they're starting to understand, have the operation in their brain that allows for development of formal morality.
Theoretically, hopefully people transition into that stage where they're thinking about bigger things.
Yeah, and you could, kind of have arrested development and not actually make good progress in those kinds of things. So you had asked me before, like, what's your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? So I'm going to go back to something I introduced on this podcast in episode 2. You can go back and listen to it if you'd like, but this is what I call my unified parenting theory. My unified parenting theory is around the idea that I'm trying to teach my children to understand and take on responsibility so that they can be successful adults.
Okay.
So it goes in 3 phases, and these phases correspond roughly to Lawrence Kohlberg's stages of moral development, but they're in the context of my home. His stages of moral development are pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional. Basically, the pre-conventional phase is to either avoid punishment or figure out what's in it for me. That's like low level, just either don't get punished or get something good, which if you correspond that to B.F. Skinner's operant conditioning, that's the positive reinforcement and the negative punishment. Like either stay away from the stuff I don't like or get something I do like.
Okay.
So that's what's best for someone in those early stages. Then the second stage, conventional, is where they're starting to learn social norms, or they want to be a good boy, or they want to follow the rules, those kinds of things.
Do they?
Then you're having...
not all kids want to follow the rules. Not all kids want to be good kids.
Okay, they don't. Okay, then we can also take the opposite side of that, is you don't want to be on detention. You don't want to go to jail.
I mean...
So either you want the good thing or you're avoiding the bad thing. Either way, we have both in society.
Yes, I agree with that. And it's motivation that is implanted in the first stage. Like, is the motivation to actually avoid punishment, or is the motivation to be a good person?
So as you'll see when I get to our system, we have both. And you can provide both as a parent.
But that's what I'm saying. Like, as a parent, you have to be aware of how your decisions at stage 1 and the messages that you're sending at your kids will direct how they evolve into stage 2 and what their end goals end up being.
Now, and then the last stage, post-conventional, is when post-conventional is when they're learning about the social contract and having a principled conscience, based on either deontology or on utility for what will achieve self-actualization or be moral based on their belief in a higher power.
I have to say, you've been going for like 20 minutes, and this has sounded like a very well-researched like TED Talks. Did you brush up on your psychology? Did you bust out a textbook and read a little bit before we started recording this podcast?
If you haven't noticed, I like this kind of thing, Josh.
You like this very much, and like I don't know, like if there's 2 levels of this though. There is the hypothetical and the theoretical and the planning stages, like what you're talking about. It's like, oh well, I planned my unified parenting theory on the 3 levels of this French guy's discussion of the development of the human psyche, and then there's where the rubber meets the road, and that is, hey, smack, stop stealing crap from your mother's purse. Okay, sorry. I missed a perfect opportunity. It's, hey, smack, stop totaling our cars.
Yeah. Okay, so let me take it back. So obviously in these stages of development, the way it worked with me is, as I was raising them up, I thought that the goal was I wanted them to learn obedience, to say yes, daddy, and do it. And that became a mantra in my house. Say yes, daddy, and do it. My kids will sing it mockingly in a sing-song voice. Yes, daddy, and do it.
That's how you know you've done it right, when they're making fun of it and still obeying.
Right, but that's only pre-conventional. And if a child only does yes, daddy, and do it, they're just doing exactly what you say. It's not enough. The next phase, the conventional, is for them to be aware that there's something bigger than themselves. And that, I think, is characterized by them saying, what else can I do to help? Still, they aren't the one deciding what else needs to be done, but the fact that they're recognizing that and asking and following up on them shows that next level of development. So I can tell a kid's advancing from the first stage to the second stage when they start saying, what else can I do to help? And then the third stage, the post-conventional, is for them to independently figure out what needs to be done and do it. And I will point this out when I see my kids doing it. I'll be like, good job, you're at level 3. I can see there that you figured out what needed to be done and do it. And right now, when we're packing up our whole house and moving, and I need all of the kids to be like packing their own suitcases and helping keep their room clean and all those kinds of things, I really need them at level 3. I can't go around having them say, yes, daddy, and do it, and me think of everything they need to do.
Fair. And I get that. Now, and you've, like you said, you talked about that portion of it, at least, in depth in episode 2, like those specific things that you want your kids to be at. But again, I've got a question like the kind of the bigger picture here, because everything that you're talking about is action-based. What are they doing? Like, do you have a formalized system for instilling some kind of what the motivation is, or what the underlying principles that drive these decisions are?
Great. So that's a good transition. So you have reinforcers, and they're called primary and secondary reinforcers. Primary reinforcers are things that are very direct and primary. The way they refer to it in psychology is they say, does it pass the caveman test? Like, if you had a caveman here and you did this thing, would he like it? Like, if I gave a caveman a piece of candy, he would lick it and then realize it was good and pop it in his mouth and eat it. So that's a primary reinforcer. If I gave the caveman some money, he would look at it, decide he couldn't eat it, and throw it over his shoulder. So that is therefore a secondary reinforcer. So there's an advantage to secondary reinforcers because they can be more versatile than primary reinforcers. Because a primary reinforcer is only coincidental to whatever need it fulfills. And if they don't have that need at the time, then it can't be used. But a secondary reinforcer allows you to monetize it and apply it to different things.
I get that. As long as the person that you are giving the secondary reinforcer to recognizes the abstract value of the thing that you are giving them, then it's fine. This doesn't answer my question, though. You're talking about reinforcers.
No. So if I'm trying to potty train a toddler and I've set up a continuous reinforcement schedule where every time they go pee-pee in the potty, they get an M&M and they're not hungry, then they just piss on themselves because they don't want an M&M right now.
What do they get if they pee in the dishwasher?
It can get a little bit complicated.
They get cauliflower? It's cauliflower, isn't
it? Okay. So consistency is key. First of all, that's the main mantra. And I tried to set up a secondary reinforcement. So here's what my wife and I decided to do. First of all, nobody really wants to do positive punishment or negative reinforcement. You don't want to have to take away things they like, or you don't have to present things they don't like. You'd rather be able to manage their behavior by presenting things they do like or taking away things they don't like.
Okay, I can kind of get behind that. I'm actually a huge fan of the negative punishment. I love taking away things that they like because it's super easy for me to implement.
Yes. So, and part of our system we built around that. So my oldest 2 sons, as they were starting to reach the age where they were transitioning from the pre-operational to the concrete operational phase, we recognized that we need to be more formal in developing their behavior. So we set up a system where we created tokens that were associated with these rewards and punishments.
Okay.
And then applied schedules to them. So here's what we did. First of all, we got them little like tin cups that they decorated and put their names and art on the outside of so that they felt some type of sense of belonging to it. And then we put popsicle sticks in those tin cups. Now, we were using a fixed interval reinforcement schedule for what was screen time. So in a typical school week year, the kind of behavior we want to see during the week is during the week we wanted them doing their homework, doing their chores, not doing any of the negative things like violence or disobedience or those kinds of things. And so that was the standard behavior expectation. Then this cup full of popsicle sticks, they'd start the week with 12, let's say, and each one of those 12 popsicle sticks represented an increment of time. Let's say for the example here, but it can be tweaked. Each of those 12 popsicle sticks represents 10 minutes of screen time on Saturday. So they begin the week with a full cup of 120 minutes of screen time available to them that they can only use on Saturday.
So a couple of things there. First of all, it sounds like you stumbled into what every elementary teacher in America has discovered about children, is that if you give them a scoring system, they will try to maximize their score for no other reason than kids love games. And the second...
So one, this gamifies it.
Yeah, it gamifies it a bit and then makes it visible, and then they can compete with each other and blah, blah, blah. Now, the other thing that I'm going to mention, or I got two more things for you. The first one now is that starting with a full cup and working and only being able to decrease from the summit seems like a bad thing. It seems like you're not reinforcing behavior, you're just having them avoid punishment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and there's a reason for that, because one is understanding what motivates them, and in this case, our boys really like being able to sit down and play Nintendo on Saturday.
Okay.
So we're like, okay, they like playing Nintendo on Saturday, but we can't start at 0 and give them more. We need to start at a fixed amount and reduce it. It was just necessary because of the limitations of a Saturday.
Oh, okay, so while I understand that, I'm going to come back to my core question, which is, again, this is driving behavior. Like everything that you've talked about so far is driving actions. Like, does the system incorporate like trying to instill good motivation for those actions? Do you care what's going on inside their heads so long as they are behaving the correct way?
Okay, so this kind of goes back to the pigeons inside the smart bombs. At some point, even though the pigeon thinks they're going to get the food, they'll keep pecking on the battleship even if there's no food at the end because they're conditioned to do it. And
while I get that, the difference between murder and manslaughter is if you intended to kill the guy. So motivation matters.
Right, but I'm also talking about transitioning from the pre-operational phase to the concrete operational phase. And in that, when you're behaving in the required way, it doesn't matter what your motivations are because those will come later as your brain starts to develop.
You'll fill in the blanks at a later time.
Right.
And have you
just got to do the right thing for now.
Yeah, have you filled in those blanks?
Yeah. I'll get to that.
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I skipping ahead again? That's my bad.
Yeah, a little bit. Okay. So we talked about reinforcement schedules. So we set up these red sticks in the cup that every Saturday at the end of the day we'd reset. Okay, put 12 sticks in your cup. You now have a full set of sticks for next week. If you don't get in trouble this week, when next Saturday comes, you'll have 120 minutes of screen time available. Then it was time for them to sit down and do screens. They would sit down, we'd start a timer on a recurring timer, and every time that it would beep every 10 or 15 minutes, then they would get up and go pull a stick out of their cup. The last time when they went up and there was no sticks left in their cup, then they were done.
Okay.
And it was really good when their brother would have 1 or 2 more sticks in them and they would both go at the same time to pull a stick, and one would be on his last one and the other one would still have 2 or 3 left, and then he would have to sit there and watch his brother play.
Well, I mean, that can be fun.
So this was a fixed interval reinforcement schedule where reinforcement occurs the first time after a fixed time has elapsed since a previous reinforcement. And then even if they screwed up and had like the worst week ever, Saturday evening reset back to 100%.
Do you still use the system? Like, was it successful? Did it work as intended? Did it phase out? Like, what happened to it?
Okay, I'm going to hit pause on that question because I'm going to answer it when I combine it with a few other things.
Man, I keep asking these questions that you are not answering. You're like, oh, I'll get to it later.
Now
I feel like we're not going to get to it later.
It's because there's other that's only addressing one portion of the behavior. There's other things we did. So another thing we did was we wanted to also have rewards they would get for good behavior that was separate from removing the positive things they wanted for bad behavior. So that we had a completely separate system. And I think it was important that we separated them. If you get in trouble, you lose screen time. If you do something good, we don't get back screen time because that just muddles it and confuses it. And it makes it very subjective. Like just the reduction in screen time, very clear. That's what happens when you misbehave. So we created what we called the prize shelf. The prize shelf was like the prize counter at Chuck E. Cheese.
Again, this is like every elementary school. All right, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, I get it. You've seen your kids do this. Have you done it at home?
Yes,
because it works.
Yes, my wife implemented this last year in 2020 when we came in for homeschooling, and then I don't know, like I don't have problems with my son for the most part. He's a goody two shoes, suck up firstborn, like we all are when you're the firstborn. My wife and I were both that way, but my daughter, Ben, sometimes I just want to pick her up and shake her and be like, "What is broken inside of you?" Not really. Like she's adorable.
Never shake a baby.
Not really, but like for example, she'll do something that I don't like her doing, and then I'll sit her down and like get eye level and explain to her, "You shouldn't have done this. Here are all the reasons why." And like her eyes are wandering, and look around, like, "Yeah, okay, I'm sorry," but.
Yes, but she's 6, so she's still in the pre-operational phase, and you're thinking concrete operational.
Well, I am punished. I am punishing you. This is your punishment, and this is why I am punishing you. I think it's important to do. Personally, I think it's important.
You can tell her why, but she's not going to understand why yet.
And I get that. She's not going to understand the why, but it's still important to give her the why now. I treat her like I talk to her like she is an adult, recognizing that she's like 75% of this conversation is going to go in one ear out the other. Here's the thing that drives me nuts, Ben. Is that she gets somewhat upset when I do that. Like when you're being punished for these reasons. Do you understand? Yes. And she's like kind of sad, but she doesn't really get it. The one time I told her, go into the classroom and clip yourself down because they have charts with their names on a little clothespin and they start in the middle and they can either go up or down depending on their behavior. And I said, go clip yourself down. She freaking lost it. And like it went straight to the core of her brain that like she had screwed up so bad and there was, what can she possibly do to fix this? And I'm over here as a parent like, seriously, I put in all this time and effort in trying to explain to you what you're doing wrong and how you're being punished, and all I had to do was move a clothespin 6 inches to get to you?
Yeah, but that shows that your system had the desired effect. Now, and that's one of the points I want to make here. It took what used to be strife and improvisational, making it up as you go along. Child does something bad, and now you have to improv. I'm going to improv and like, oh, you did this thing, it's bad, now I have to like make up a speech or come up with a consequence. Instead, if you've gamified it and you've introduced secondary reinforcers, now you can just use an increment that you've already set up. So in this instance, like if it was my children and they'd done the bad thing, I'd be like, go pull a red stick. I don't got to raise my voice. I don't got to be angry. I just say, we execute a increment in our system that we've set up.
This appeals to the lazy side of my brain.
It's not just lazy though. It's effective.
Wait, that's the best kind of thing. It does what you want it to do, and it's easy.
Yeah. So then on Saturday, when their brother's still playing Nintendo and they can't play anymore, they're like, I don't like that. So then the next time they do something bad and I say pull a red stick, it just over time, I would see the negative behaviors go down and down and down until suddenly they weren't doing the bad stuff anymore. So that's the bad stuff. I was getting to the prize shelf, though. The prize shelf's something different. So the prize shelf, one, gets them involved. So what we would do is we would go shopping. We'd go to the toy store. We let them pick things in, the like $5 to $10 range that they want, candy or little trinkets or stuff like that. We put it on the shelf back at home, and we put price labels on them. And the price that we ended up settling on based on our family's like socioeconomic status and stuff like that was just roughly one increment. We called them clips. One clip was worth about 50 cents. So if they picked a dollar prize, then it would cost 2 clips. Or in other words, this thing that you picked out that's worth $1 sitting on the shelf, you got to do 2 good things to get that.
Okay.
And then we just define what the good things are. Here is what constitutes getting a clip. Doing your daily chore is a clip. Doing any of the things on this list of additional chores that aren't one of your daily chores are a clip. And it became what's called a fixed ratio reinforcement schedule, which is that the behavior is reinforced after n responses. Now, the interesting thing about a fixed ratio reinforcement schedule is that right after they get the reward, the behavior tends to level out a little bit.
Yeah, because they did the extra effort to get the thing that they wanted. Now that they have that thing, then it's over.
Right. And then they're like, okay, I want another thing. And then it starts to go up again, and it accelerates right before it. Like when a kid gets really, like say they wanted something that costs 40 clips and they're at 30, that last 10 will take a lot less time than the previous 30 did. They'll do lots of extra things.
Which makes sense.
Which is fine. I don't mind a kid having a flurry of activity to try to earn something on the prize shelf. Okay, so
do you still have a prize shelf for your for like your adult children now? Does Kaya have the keys to like a VW Bug up on a prize shelf with a bunch of price tags on it?
Okay, Josh, I'm gonna reward you and give you a little bit of a reward here. Yes, I like that you're taking all this to logical conclusion. I'm still in the the concrete operational phase here. I'm still in the preteen phase. These are the age of your kids.
Okay.
We're not to formal operational yet. Okay, so we also wanted to introduce something in a variable ratio, which is that you reinforce on average for every n number of responses, but not always the same. This is gambling. Basically, pull the handle on the slot machine, and you never know when the good thing's going to happen.
Every week we have a mystery chore, and if you're the one that does the mystery chore, you get a secret bonus.
Yes. Now,
did I really guess it? I did not just guess it.
Yeah. No. That's a great example of this. I don't think we used that exact one because the behind the behaviors we were going for are more like, I caught you helping your little brother get dressed in the morning.
Okay. Okay.
That kind of thing. So this is really effective, and we had what we called the gold stick. And my wife and I love bestowing the gold stick. If I reward the gold stick to you, you get to go put it in your cup. And now on this Saturday, when it's screen time, you have unlimited screen time. No matter how many red sticks you had during the week, you now have unlimited that time. As long as screen time is open, you're golden.
Literally golden with the golden stick. This is the
it's
Survivor,
like winning the lottery.
This is the immunity idol. Everybody wants this thing. And is there only one? Is it finite? Is there only one golden stick?
Yes, but it definitely carried some status. Like my kids were like, "Ooh, I got the gold stick. Wow, Michael got this gold stick. What did he do to get the gold stick?"
So, did you have as parents bestowing this onto your children? Did you have to wait? We can't give it out on Monday or Tuesday. That's gonna blow the whole week. It's gotta wait till Thursday.
No, you just, when the right thing comes along, you know what it is. And if it's been a while, you're like, let's look for a reason.
That's...
But again, Josh, when you're in the pre-operational and concrete operational stages, it's important that they have these things. As they get older, the rewards become inherent. You don't help your little brother get dressed in the morning because you might get the gold stick. You help your little brother get dressed in the morning because you love him.
Well, and this is the part that I'm missing. It's the transitional period, because at some point you want this behavior to continue, but obviously the material rewards have to go away, because that's not how the world works. You're right,
and you're trying to read the last page of the book first. So let me read one more page, and then we'll go to the end. Okay?
Ben, you've read so many psychology pages. I can't remember half the vocabulary that you've given me. Is there a quiz at the end?
All right. So let me tell you what the quiz at the end is. I am not prescribing this system to you or to any one of our listeners. What I want you to do is understand the concepts that I'm telling you and tune it to your situation and apply it your way. You don't got to use clips. You don't got to use sticks. My children had these cute little baskets with clothespins in them, and whenever they would do a chore, they would take one of the clothespins out of the basket and clip it on the handle, so you could see this visual representation of how much currency that they'd accumulated. And then when they would cash it in, they would take all the clothespins off the handle of the basket, drop them in the basket, and get their prize off the shelf. But you don't need to do...
I'm going to predict the future here for a second, because here's the thing. I'm a very logical guy. Obviously, I'm an accountant. And so a lot of the aspects of what you're talking about appeal to me. And I'm while we're talking about this, I'm applying it to my specific situation, and I can see how some aspects of it could fit well into our lives. But I will tell you right now, I can feel the anger of my wife from the future for trying to hey, you know what? Ben was talking about this really cool interesting spreadsheetable way to implement childhood discipline, and I think there's pieces of it that are worthwhile. I can feel her anger simmering from the future.
Okay, so there's one other reinforcement schedule, which is called variable interval, which is that you reinforce on average, but not always the same. And this feels like one of the great parenting successes of my life, and I'll tell the whole life cycle of it. So what was happening is I would cook dinner, and we would sit down to dinner, and my kids would whine about what I'd put on the table. Now, no parent likes that. You know, you work hard. You've talked about this with your kids. You just don't like it. It's rude. But kids don't understand that. They're just telling you what they don't like. And the thing about kids whining about what you're serving them for dinner and maybe being rude at the dinner table is it doesn't really cross the threshold of what I would say go pull a red stick for. You know, it's not like an infraction.
Right.
It's just kind of annoying.
Well, this is, in our house, we have the saying, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. And then there's the whole like, oh, well, I ate most of this. Can I have dessert? No. And we laugh in their face. Like, you don't get dessert because you didn't eat any of this.
Yes. And it's sometimes if they know that dessert is an option every night and they're like, well, if the choice is get dessert or eat this that I don't like, then sometimes they'll just deliberately make that economic trade-off.
Which that's how life is. Like sometimes you don't want to swallow the bad stuff in order to get the good stuff at the end, and we're okay with them making that internal calculus.
Right. But what I wanted was to permanently extinct the behavior of complaining and being fussy at dinner.
Okay.
I just wanted that to go away. So we used
So did you used to have 7 children and you just shot the first one that complained about what they were getting for dinner?
No, that's a fixed ratio reinforcement schedule. This is a variable interval reinforcement schedule. So in a variable interval reinforcement schedule, what I would do is I'd had the 7 days of the week on little pieces of paper in a hat, and I would pull the hat out, and my wife and I would reach into the hat and pull out one of the 7 days a week, and then her and I would look at it, and without telling the kids, we would put it back in the hat, and we would say, now Mama and I both know the secret dessert night.
Oh, Lord. So you only had dessert one night, and I'm guessing, like, if anybody complains, nobody got it? Did you make it a group thing? Or is it just the individuals?
Yes. If anybody complained, nobody got it. And what would happen is at the end of dinner, on the night that was on the variable interval that was selected as secret dessert night, we would make the announcement whether they'd succeeded or failed. And it only took them failing maybe 3 times before that behavior was completely extinct.
All I can think about is making it a group thing is such a nightmare for the individual because it just creates such loathing and hatred for the one person.
Yeah, I get it. You one person that screwed it up. I can't. We may have just done it like, okay, everybody gets dinner except so and so. Everybody gets dessert except so and so.
I was gonna say, geez, Ben. It's like, okay, like, oh, I don't like meatballs. Well, then you don't get anything.
Or sometimes my wife and I would just have dessert and be like, you guys screwed up. You'll get a chance next week. Let's pull out the hat and draw the day, the secret dessert night for next week.
Oh, the secret dessert night for this week was Thursday, Friday. I'm like, oh, that's a bummer for you guys.
And the great thing about keeping it a secret is that you can change it if you want to.
You jerk. Did you actually?
Now, here's the thing, and here's going to the next level. We only had to have secret dessert night for maybe 3 months, and it was completely successful to the point where it wasn't necessary to continue anymore.
So okay. I'm starting to see some of the long-term things here. This is that idea that they did a study where they put monkeys in a room because we love to experiment on monkeys, and they hung delicious fruit from a basket in the middle of the room. And whenever one of the monkeys went and touched the basket, they would like hit him with a fire hose or something ridiculous. And then after a while, all the monkeys realized, oh, you don't touch the fruit is bad. And then they introduced new monkeys into the place, and they're like, oh, hey, check out the fruit. And all the other monkeys are like, no, don't touch the fruit. You don't want the fruit. And then they removed all of the original monkeys and brought in more new monkeys. And then when the new monkeys went for the fruit, the old new monkeys stopped like, no, you don't want that fruit.
And they didn't even know why.
But none of them in that cage had ever received the punishment for touching the fruit, and they had no idea why they didn't want to touch it.
Yeah.
So this is the implementation, is like you did it for the 3 months, And to the point where the kids forgot why they weren't complaining, kind of. Like, or they just didn't think about it. It didn't reach the threshold of their conscious brain. They just stopped complaining about food. It's not a thing that we do anymore. There was a reason before, but we all kind of let that be forgotten in the long, long ago, and we just don't complain about food anymore.
Yes, and this is a result of operant conditioning called extinction, when a behavior that was previously reinforced is no longer effective. And it could be intentional or it could be unintentional. Like, for instance, if you're a kid at school and you're getting bullied and you make a decision to stop reacting to the bullies, and when they stop getting a reaction from you, then they leave you alone because that extincts the behavior.
That's never a thing. I was told that all throughout my entire childhood. It never once worked.
Okay, you have a cat that meows until you wake up and feed it in the middle of the night, and you don't do that, so it stops meowing.
No, I have a cat that tried to sleep between my legs while I was lying on my back, so I couldn't roll over in my sleep because my sleeping brain thought there was some kind of impediment. It only took that cat being launched across the room 3 times by my foot at high velocity before it realized it doesn't want to sleep there anymore.
Very good. Good example of operant conditioning. That was a positive punishment where you presented a negative stimulus for it to decrease an undesired behavior.
The cat is fine. Don't at me. I love my cats.
An example of an unintentional extinction might be like you have a worker and they get there and they work really hard, but you never give them any kind of any type of recognition or acknowledgement, and they eventually just stop working hard because you extincted the behavior.
That's why I left the Air Force.
Okay, so there's a lot of examples of these kinds of things that we're trying to teach our children, like potty training, teeth brushing, bathing, making their bed. These are all the kinds of things that you're doing with them when they're in the very, sensomotor pre-operational kind of phase of their life. Of course, with your children, there's got to be some of those things that are virtually automatic now, right?
For me? Like in my household, you're asking me specifically.
Sure, you don't still have Jane putting stickers on a chart for potty training.
No,
done.
Potty training was handled like almost entirely by my wife, and she did a wonderful job because we don't have to worry about potty training anymore.
But as you know, the goal isn't that you set up a system that then has to be maintained in perpetuity. The system is to help them transition from one developmental phase to the next, and then the system can be removed and the behavior will remain.
Yes. Okay. So this is the last page that we're getting to. This is where we're starting.
Now I'm getting to the last page that you're asking about.
Okay. Yes.
So those are all the good things that we want them to do. There's also the not doing bad stuff, not cleaning up after yourself, being violent, teasing. The rich family definition of teasing is doing something someone doesn't like on purpose, being disobedient, those kinds of things. Again, I don't want to have them have a cup of Red Sticks in the house and always pull a Red Stick for the rest of their life. I want to just be able to give them a stern look or have them know themselves and stop doing the bad things. And you know what? My children aren't violent to each other. They still aren't good at cleaning up after themselves. They don't tease each other generally most of the time, and they're pretty obedient.
They're not good about looking behind them when they're backing out of a driveway. And all right, so side note, I'm going to ride you forever on that one. Just throw that out there. Okay. If you haven't picked that up, that's my running gag.
Okay, so learn the good behaviors, stop doing the bad behaviors, and then lastly, learn to be a good person. I want them to help and do age-appropriate chores. And part of a system like this is, of course, you're adjusting the age-appropriateness of it as they get older. Maybe the increment in the system is still the same throughout the pre-operational and operational phases, but the difficulty of what you're expecting them to do. When they're brand new, just learning how to do chores, they'd be like, okay, come in the bathroom and wipe across the kitchen, the bathroom counter with this rag. And later on, I'd be like, I expect you to go in there, scrub the shower, scrub the toilet, and wipe down the sink, and sweep the floor.
That's intense. Yeah, that's good stuff.
Yeah. Yours will get there. But then I also want them to be kind, to take care of themselves, to have good manners, to do well in school. And school's a good example of one where if you turn it too much into a gamified system, then they'll just make an economic decision and be like, yeah, I don't like that class very much. I'll just take the punishment or I'll take the removal of the reward, and not understanding that school isn't about, whether or not they've got the clips and the sticks. It's about them learning for life.
I know we talked about the education system and how bad it is. Like if my kid starts flunking out of cursive, like I'm going to tell him that's unacceptable. Thou shalt get an A. But after he leaves the room, I'm going to look at my wife and like, it's ridiculous that he's taking cursive.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think kids can sense that. The stuff that really is or isn't important to the parents. So what we wanted to do when we introduced this system in life was to have it be something that would help them in the early phases of development where they didn't have those intrinsic external motivators, and help them transition from not knowing how to do it to getting to that end place faster and more elegantly.
This is... I know you're in the middle of putting a bow on this whole thing.
I'm almost done.
I have to comment on this part, though, because...
Go ahead.
Like you said, all parents are playing it by ear. And up to this point, I feel like I've just been doing the thing that I always do. Like, this is just my natural tendency on how you impart your values onto any other person external to you. For me personally, it's just be the example. And when asked, you give the explanation. And then you're just the one. Like, you need to be the one in front that these people look at and say, I want to be that way. And so you try to do the things that reinforce the behavior or whatever to try to drive them in that direction. But you're coming, like, so I'm trying to, like, almost subconsciously, I'm just trying to be this inspirational leader for my children to try to emulate. But then...
Yeah, but that's not going to teach them how to scrub a toilet.
Well, but I mean, obviously you fill in the details with specific instruction and the management techniques or whatever. But what you're talking about is a systematic, thought out, like, approach that is very much like I joked about earlier, spreadsheetable, documentable. Like, this is XYZ, sit down with the formal feedback. Like, this is very management style, like, how to train a tiny human to be a larger human.
Yeah, like you pointed out, like a classroom.
Yeah, this is it's remarkable how thought out and systematic it is versus like the ad hoc crap that I'm doing. Frankly, Ben, like, you're making me feel like a bad parent because I am just winging it all of the time.
Well, like I said, my wife and I were fine until I deployed, and then she had to do it by herself, and then she had to come up with a new way to do it. You guys are still on a man-to-man defense here. Like, you're not having any more kids. Maybe ad hoc's good enough.
I'm very tempted to just put this entire conversation into that bucket in my head. It's like, oh, we don't have 1,000 children. I don't need to worry about all of these hardcore systems.
And the system has some drawbacks, Josh. Like, it monetized and gamified the system and introduced secondary reinforcers, but it was hard to keep it consistent. Like, for instance, let's say we had something going on Saturday and the block of time that we normally set aside for the screen time. Man, that was a crisis. Josh. If they'd worked all week and been really good and they expected 2 solid hours of screen time and we just couldn't give it to them for whatever reason, it was really bad.
Have you ever watched the show Community? Again, you're aware of it.
Yeah.
Okay. There's an episode where one of the students finds out that A- are only given out because the teachers want to, like, acknowledge the student. Basically, it's the teacher's choice to communicate to the student. It's like, yeah, you did everything technically correct, but we don't like you, and that's why we're giving you an A-. And that secret got out, the students found out, and it literally caused a riot. Like, people started throwing bricks through windows, like, minuses aren't real. That's what this sounds like. It's like, there's no screen time on Saturday, and then next thing you know, the house is on fire.
Yeah, we had, it was so serious we would have to basically schedule a makeup block if it wasn't, we weren't able to do it.
Wow, that is some serious, like, your kids are very invested in those popsicle sticks.
Yeah. Now, there was other things we had to do. For instance, it worked fine during the school year, but what about during summer? So when summer would come around, we would adjust their chores. We would adjust the value of the clips. We would adjust the increments of the popsicle sticks. Like, for instance, during the school year, maybe each popsicle stick was worth 10 minutes, but during the summer, each one's worth 15.
I'll tell you right,
because they just have more free time.
That summertime thing, that's hitting me hard right now because my life hasn't changed, Ben. I don't work on a rotating agricultural schedule what my kids do, so I'm still pounding away doing my accounting work in the kitchen, but my kids don't have the structure from 8 to 2 that they used to have, and so now they're constantly and you know what? I'm just now realizing that my inconsistency is causing me problems. Because before, back when school was still on, they knew they weren't allowed to be on screens for like TV or video games until 3 o'clock, and they wouldn't bother me about it until then. But now, like, I'm noticing they're coming at me multiple times a day to ask for that. And I'm realizing that that's not their fault. That's my fault because I'm giving them different answers for different times.
Yeah,
if I
that's
just,
it. Consistency's key. If you just have a scheduled time and an expectation for what they got to do, then they won't bug you.
Yeah, but the problem is if they're playing in like the next room, I don't want to yell at them because they're having fun and playing, and but I'm still sitting here trying to work. Like, hey, you guys need to go somewhere else because you're freaking loud and small children, and I'm trying to do professional work. I don't want to punish them for that. But yeah, this is me. I need to be more consistent with the summertime thing.
Yeah, and then, like you've been asking all along, ultimately they reach Piaget's formal operational stage and they age out of the system, which for the most part all of my kids have done now. So we aren't really maintaining the system because it's not necessary.
Okay.
Now, there's a few other interesting drawbacks, things that came up that we didn't realize. For instance, sometimes, for whatever reason, we would end up with something on the prize shelf that nobody wanted, and we would have to hold a clearance sale. We like reduce the price of things to get it off the prize shelf. Or if somebody's like, oh my gosh, it's Saturday, I forgot to tell you, Mom, I have a birthday party this afternoon. Instead of doing like a panic run to the store to buy a present for the kid, we'd be like, I'll just pull this prize off the shelf that nobody wanted to buy. Nice. We scratch a little prize ticket off of it and wrap it up and give it the birthday party.
Now, here's a question. Do your adult children have a weird like attraction to popsicle sticks that they can't explain?
Maybe
it's like your 19-year-old like soon to be married son like going to the store and like, ooh, popsicle sticks, and just like get a whole bag of 50 for no reason.
So here's an interesting thing that happened that neither my wife nor I anticipated that was an extremely positive outcome of our system. Our children at one point decided that they wanted to help each other achieve the fixed ratio reinforcement faster. So let's say Michael was saving up for something that cost 100 clips. That's $50. So 100 clips, and he was at 70, and he would talk to his brother, and his brother would offer, and they would contribute other people's prize increments to the one person, and they would save up together to get things for each other.
Well, that's communism. You got to quash that right off the bat.
No, that's not communism at all. And my wife and I, at first, we were like, is this a problem? Because we didn't think of this. This wasn't in our...
Is this collective bargaining? Hang on a second. This is the problem here is that your kids are... Yes, it's in a positive way, but they are still ganging up against you. Like, they are working together against the system.
Yes, they were. But we had to ask ourselves, do we care if they gang up against the system? And we decided we didn't. So if they decided that they wanted to contribute their clips towards someone else's prize, we would permit it. And it was extremely positive. Like, it developed this sense of community and cooperation. There was no coercion happening. It was just selfless giving, and we did not intend that at all.
And you know what? You're pitching that as a positive. And Ben, I will say that is a positive right up until they all start voting as a block. Like when all of your kids decide to go on strike and they're sitting at the kitchen table like, no, we're not going to do chores until our demands are met. Now you've got a problem.
Yeah, I mean, there were other problems. For instance, if I had a kid that was really acting up and having a really tough week, and I'd only put 12 popsicle sticks in their cup, and I made them pull the 12th popsicle stick, my system is now ineffective for the rest of the week.
It's like, oh, what are they going to do? Mean? Force me to retire and move me to Louisiana?
Exactly. Once you reach the bottom of the cup, now your system is evacuated. So we had to come to a careful balance where we were not letting... You don't want to get caught pacing yourself.
It's almost...
If they realize...
Yeah, it's almost a logarithmic scale of doing stuff bad to get a popsicle stick pulled. Because you knew when you pulled the last one, now this kid's off scot-free and he's going to be a little terror for the rest of the week. So like the amount of...
It's the old Santa Claus is coming threat.
The amount of bad stuff that he had to do to get the third, second, and last popsicle stick pulled was increasing exponentially.
Yeah. Santa Claus is on a fixed interval reinforcement schedule, which is the least effective of the four. The good behavior goes up right before the stimulus is presented and then flattens out after that.
All right, Ben. Well, let me wrap up my portion of this because it's you clearly with your wife created a very complex, in-depth, and put a ton of time, thought, energy, and effort and just sheer willpower into creating a force multiplying systematic approach to raise your children in a disciplinary and a behavioral standpoint. And while I have been over here mostly heckling you this entire explanation, I do recognize the amount of just raw work that you put into it. And there are some things that have stuck with me, some interesting concepts that I'm taking away from this. And even if I have to say, like, if I'm talking for our entire listener base, I have to be the most skeptical person on the of all the people that listen to this podcast of the stuff that you say. So if I'm walking away from this conversation with a couple of insights and maybe some things I'm going to think about in the future, that's a huge win for the rich behavioral modification system.
Thank you. Now, there's one other thing I want to talk about, and then I'll wrap it up. And that is the challenge of my daughter, which you brought up throughout this discussion. My teenage daughter that's wrecked 2 cars. She has always been an anomaly in our system because my wife and I, after we'd established what motivated our sons, it didn't replicate for her. She wasn't motivated by the same things as them.
Okay.
She didn't care about playing Nintendo on Saturdays, at one bit. So we quickly realized that we couldn't have the same thing incremented for her. And she was happy not getting the things on the prize shelf if it meant not doing her chores.
Interesting. Okay.
So the challenge for you as a parent is you can't introduce a system like this if you don't know what motivates your children. And sometimes what motivates them might not fit nicely into a system like this where you can increment it into bits of time or pieces of dollar value. So that's the challenge. And for her, I don't know that I ever really figured it out, Josh. She's fast approaching the post-operational phase, and I believe she's turning into a self-actualized, good human being who's kind and good to others. But it is not because of my behavioral management system.
She is an aberration. We don't know why or how this happened, but it seems like it's working okay, so we're going to call it a win anyway.
Yeah.
My daughter... all right, so Ben, like, you're not the only one. My daughter is 6. She's 6, and I already feel like I have no idea how to control or alter her behavior in any usable sense. So, like, you've got 6 kids. If you've got one aberration out of the 6, that's a much better ratio than what my batting average is over here. I'm batting 500, where I feel like my son's kind of got it, and my daughter, like, I just want to, again, I don't get it. I don't get it. Why are you so difficult?
Well, I hope you can figure it out, and I'm glad I may have been a little bit of help. And Nicole, if I messed things up, I'm sorry.
Yes, I will direct any and all feedback to you directly. Like, even though I'm the one that's going to be bringing it up to her, it's like, so, hey, Ben said this thing. It was Ben, not me. No, this is Ben. No, you stop yelling. No, put the plates down. Stop throwing things at me. No, it's not that bad. It's really not.
Okay, I got a request for you, Josh. So next time we talk in 2 weeks, I will now it will have been after my son's wedding.
This is a major life event for a lot of people in the rich household, not just like your son, but you. This is a big step for you. Like the next,
it is. We're adding a whole new member to our family.
The next step for you is to be a grandfather, and holy crap, I don't think I can be friends with a grandfather.
Starting the next chapter of life, losing friends who don't want to be friends with grandfathers, all kinds of things. So, we did one where where I interviewed you about your marriage. So maybe next time you can interview me about the cultural and social things surrounding marriage in my family.
Ben, you can't tell me what to do.
Maybe I need to introduce I need to introduce some stimulus on a fixed reinforcement schedule.
If you alter my behavior in a way that the listeners can actually recognize, that's going to be a huge loss for me as an intelligent person. Don't you do your Jedi mind tricks on me over podcast.
As always, everything we've talked about today, I'll have links and notes to the stuff we talked about in the show notes and on our website. I'll put some memes, some graphics I made. I even made a really good graphic of my my consolidated parental theory and some of the other things that we've talked about that will be up on our Facebook page, as well as there will be an open thread on our subreddit if you want to go there and join in the discussion, talk about your parenting ideas, ask questions, those types of things.
If you like what we do, please recommend us to a friend. It's one of the, I feel like that's a low bar to ask. Like, if you like what we're talking about, obviously you should tell your friends. They're your friends. If you like this, they should like it too. If you want to show a little bit more, obviously get involved with all of the different social media platforms that Ben is so good about upkeeping, like joining the conversation on the Reddit and the Facebook pages and all of that stuff. And if you love us and you can't get enough of what we do, consider becoming a patron on our Patreon page. Now, we have bonus content that we put out. We just put out an episode about smartphones. It's super nerdy and great. There's also stuff that we like to give away. Ben did a giveaway not too long ago where there was some classes or some online training that he could get. We have more of the challenge coins at the time of recording. If you're in the far future, sorry, we're probably out.
And as always, thanks for listening to Bad and Magic Podcast.